Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm your host. And, I'm looking for people across different disciplines that are going to help you to work smarter. And, today we're going to talk about communication and how important that is in terms of really boosting your productivity. Because if you can't manage your relationships, because our relationships are everything, that is one of the cruxes of productivity when we're working together with a team, when we want to collaborate, when we want to innovate, and simply when we want to move projects forward. So today I'm super excited to have Jennifer Chapman with us. She used to be a workaholic. And she was known as the go-to person for getting things done and managing more difficult customers and clients. She's thrived on challenging situations and proving to others that she was invincible, which can't be true. Nobody's invincible, right? So when her mental and physical health began to take a hit, which many of you might be able to appreciate, especially with the pressure that we've been under the pandemic, she began the journey to create that work-life balance that she valued and wanted. And so Jennifer is an expert leadership coach who works with clients who want to be more confident, more authentic, more successful, and more productive and have that work-life balance. And she especially enjoys helping leaders who have been promoted through functional expertise, those people who are so good at what they do that they get promoted, but they haven't been really trained in how to be managers, right? So that is a key area. So Jennifer, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, it's interesting that, you started out in your bio with talking about being a workaholic and, so just give us a little bit about your journey and what your biggest lesson was there, because I think there's a lot of people that can relate, especially now, surprisingly enough, the pandemic has created more workaholics because we're working in our homes.
Yes.
And people don't know when to shut down. So I think that's a relevant topic to just touch on in the beginning of our conversation.
My greatest lesson learned was, like you said in my intro, I am not invincible. And that sounds so silly. And yet I think there was a real part of me that thought I could work endless hours and do amazing things. And I worked in an organization that fostered that culture. It was totally normal to work 70, 80 hours a week. And then even some of my friends, I lived in Washington, D.C. at the time. My friends were attorneys. They worked on the Hill. We all worked 70 to 80 hours a week. That was just normal. And I put everything I had. And I think my identity got wrapped up even into my job. And it really wasn't until it actually happened at a couple different points where I had some health problems with sinus infections. Then I was having migraine issues. My father passed away unexpectedly. I think that was in 2011. And what was fascinating with that was my dad passed the day before my youngest brother's wedding. And so here we are doing all the wedding stuff.
Right.
And then now we've got to people talk about the grieving aspect of a death. Nobody talks about the logistics that go with a death. And so the day of my brother's wedding, I'm buying a burial plot, selecting a casket, notifying friends and loved ones. I mean, it was just insane. And I ended up taking a 2-week leave of absence between handling the funeral stuff and then the wedding stuff for my brother. And it was that experience where I was 2 weeks away from the office that I learned the world didn't stop because I wasn't there. Life continued. I had a fantastic team that ran like clockwork while I was gone. And it was such an epiphany to me that I can take vacation and not check my email and everything's going to be just fine. And so I think
that will not fall down and
crumble
around us, right?
like there are other wonderful people who can do fantastic things. And if you're doing your job as a good leader, you should be able to have a team that can carry on just fine in an unexpected absence. So I think between the health issues I was having and then being gone and seeing that the world didn't fall apart without me, those things together really gave me permission to be a lot more intentional about my work boundaries, what kind of a culture I wanted to work in, how many hours I wanted to work in a week, and why. What was my goal in working so much or working less? And that was just life-changing for me.
Yeah. Hard times, right? And a lot of times it is those hard times that teach us the biggest lessons. So hopefully for those of you listening, right, it's been difficult. 2020 certainly was not an easy year. And hopefully also, you're taking some valuable lessons from it. And maybe one of them is that you're not invincible.
Yes.
One of the things that you said that I just want to highlight is, you talked about identity, right? And that, your identity might have been tied up in your work. And I think, what came up for me that I thought was interesting about connecting that is I wonder if sometimes we think that the number of hours that we work is also a little bit tied up in our identity. And that's why sometimes it's hard to let go, right? And we get caught up in just do one more thing, that perfectionism or what I call over-functioning type of behavior. What do you think about that, having gone through that experience? Do you
yes.
think something to that?
Well, I think so. For anybody who's worked in a profession where they have billable hours, I see it would be really easy to equate success and accomplishment to how many hours you've billed. I see this in the medical professions. I see this in attorneys, and then absolutely in consultants. And that, I think the biggest danger is even allowing ourselves to measure our success by anything external. And I work a lot with leaders who have great instincts and they're doing just fine, but they lack confidence. And I think if people can really own what their strengths are, be willing to admit that you're not perfect and what some of those development areas are, you've got to figure out for yourself, what does success mean for me? And not letting it be defined even by your boss. And I know some people are freaking out that I said that. And well, what about my performance appraisal? And yeah, what about it? Right?
Well, you're also freaking out. Let's stop for a minute, because I think it's interesting when I go and I speak to billable hours type of companies. They are definitely different, right? You definitely have to segment the mentality of those that are billable hours and those that are project oriented. Well, that's the way the company measures success. So how do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that with you personally and what the company goals are and how you're going to be evaluated because you didn't hit the billable hours or you have to work insane overtime in order to hit those because you've got administrative work as well?
Right. So what I do for myself and what I recommend for my clients is before you look at any external metrics, that at least once a year, you go through an exercise of what do I want to accomplish? What are my professional goals? How do I know I'm doing a good job? And maybe some of those are, feedback that you get from colleagues, or it might be, that you create a product and there is somebody else thanking you or confirming that you did a good job, but come up with for you what matters. And then when you have to look at the external measurements for your success, such as what's going to go on a performance review, then you can decide how much weight you want to give those different things. So, and it might even be that you just consciously decide, I am willing to take a hit on my performance review because I've prioritized something else. For example, when I was working at a Fortune 500 consulting firm, and oh my gosh, I look back on that time in my life and how many billable hours, how much time I had to spend bringing in new business, writing government proposals, managing my team. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just crazy what was on my plate. And somehow in the middle of all that, I decided to go through a coaching program.
And you didn't have enough to do.
Because I didn't have enough to do. Well, so I never knew what a coach was, ended up overseeing a leadership project that had coaching as a component. And as soon as I started working with the coaches for the first time in my life, I felt, now I know what I want to be when I grow up. And so without even really thinking about it logistically, I didn't know how I was going to pay for it. I didn't know how I was going to make time for it. I signed up, got accepted to a coaching program, and it was an amazing experience. But I look, I look back on that and how I fit it in. Oh my gosh. But in the midst of me going through that program, I had 3 days a month that I had to be in person in class. And right before one of those 3-day periods, I got asked to lead a proposal for my company. And it was very high visibility. And there was some stuff in my background that made me the perfect person to lead it. And I said, I would love to help you with this, but I am in class for the next 3 days. I won't be available enough to do that. Can I recommend some other people? And I also said I'd be happy to review things in the evenings, but I'm not the one to lead it. And so, they're like, okay, fine. And had me play a small role, got someone else to lead it. But guess what showed up on my performance appraisal? I got dinged for saying no. And when I first read it, I got, my face got red and I started feeling really mad. But then I was like, no, Jen, you said no because you were saying yes to your coaching program and you could not have done both. So it's okay. It's okay to not get an exceeds on everything every year, because that might not be where you decide to put your time and energy.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good for you, right? That's the thing that we don't exercise enough is saying no. And in this case, you got dinged for it. But I also think that there are managers out there that would respect that and that would rather you say no if it's not within your capacity. So, that does depend on, who you're working for and what their style of leadership is. And, also managing those expectations is an important part, right? We said we were going to talk about communication a little bit. So, maybe that can be a dovetail into talking about, communication and leadership at any level, right? And how I like in your focus, you talk about working with people who are experts in what they do, and then they get promoted to manager. So like somebody who's doing the billable hours, right? Or is the engineer or the lawyer or whatever. And then they get to, because they're so good at what they do, they get to work with a lot of other people on the team, but they don't necessarily have those managerial skills. So being more productive in that role, what are some tips that you would say for somebody who's newly promoted as an expert into a role like that? What are some things that they can do to be more effective and efficient in their job?
So one thing I would say is to know that you're not just limited to saying yes or no. And in fact, a lot of people think they're only allowed to say yes because at any other answer, I'm going to be looked upon negatively. And that's not true. That's not true. So yes, if somebody asks you to take care of a project or get you something by this time, sometimes if you say, yes, I can do that. I have the competency. I have the time. Yes, then say yes. And then no is a scary word. And there is a time and a place to say no. But then I also want to suggest 2 alternatives. And these are highlighted in a book called Language and the Pursuit of Happiness by Chalmers Brothers. And he says that in addition to yes or no, you can also commit to commit and you can counter offer. So commit to commit, this is the one where you get totally taken off guard and someone throws something on your plate and you just kind of nod or say yes because you're tongue-tied. You don't even know what to say. So pre-pandemic, this was walking down the hall to a meeting and somebody walking past you the other way saying, hey, Jen, can you get me the blah, blah, blah report by today at 2 p.m.? And then just keeps on walking. They assume the yes, right? And that doesn't happening the same way, I think, with us working virtually, but it still happens. You get the IM, you get the phone call, whatever. Can you drop everything and do something? So instead of just reacting and saying yes or reacting saying no, you can say, hey, let me check my calendar or let me look back at my project deadlines and can I get back to you even just like an hour from now? Now I'm being casual with your audience, but be firm with whoever's asking this to you and say, hey, yes, let me check what I've got going on and I'll let you know for sure by 4 p.m. today. And then keep that commitment. Absolutely. Because then if you don't, they're going to see that as just a way for you to procrastinate and get out of things. And that just gives you time to take a breath and to look at everything you've got going on and to say, oh, wait, okay, if I switch this thing around, I think I could get that reported by Thursday. Or, you know what, actually, there's no way I could make that happen. And so that takes us to counteroffer. And with counteroffer, that's when you say, kind of like what I did with the proposal I was mentioning when I was in that coaching program. Counteroffer is saying a condition that would need to change in order for you to say yes. So I couldn't make my schedule different because of the coaching program I was in, but I did offer, hey, I could play a role as a subject matter expert if that would be helpful on this proposal. Or I also offered, I know so-and-so and so-and-so who would be great at it. One of the people I recommended had never led a proposal before. And I said, I'd be happy to mentor her offline and help bring her up to speed to what she needs to do to lead this. So I didn't just abandon them, but I offered help in a way that I knew I had the capacity and that I could keep that commitment.
Yeah, I think it's true that people assume that if they don't say yes, then there's trouble. They have to say yes. And I love the whole idea of the commit to commit and the counteroffer because they're the alternatives. It's not a concrete yes. It's a, hey, let me check and I'll get back to you. That's respectful. And it gives you the chance to check your capacity. And I'm a big one just to add in the middle there or with both of those is ask questions. I don't know why we don't use this valuable tool to understand and get clarification on what we're really being asked, so, well, what does that entail? Let's break it down. Is it possible that we could, when you do the counteroffer, right, before you hit a counteroffer, ask a couple of questions to find out, well, could the delivery be broken out into 3 parts, so that you could, extend and get the things that are most important. So if somebody says, I need it by 2 p.m. today, that seems really tight for my schedule. Is it possible to break that out, right? And then you're engaging in a conversation and that will save you, but it'll also get them to think more about how urgent is this really?
Mm-hmm.
And also maybe there is an opportunity to create a win-win so that the most important part gets there by the time they need it, but the other parts can be completed at a later time. I like that. And this is important, at any level. So whether, any time that you're working with your clients, that you're working with a manager or boss or anything, even with your family, right? These are across the board valuable tools to be able to use.
Absolutely. And I think also I liked when you asked about or mentioned asking questions, that it also helps us make sure we're on the same page with the other person. I've been asked to do a report, and in my head, I thought it was 10 pages of text when all they were looking for was one PowerPoint slide, completely different scenario here. And I think I see it a lot in many industries where I coach, that people make assumptions based on what they're used to, but maybe the person asking for it isn't in the same line of work. So what report is or a summary is for this group is completely different from this other group.
Absolutely. And what's urgent is completely different, right? So in defining, if somebody says, get me that as soon as possible, does that mean, today? Does that mean this week? Right. So we definitely have to ask questions to make sure we're managing each other's expectation. And like you said, on the same page.
Or close of business. For some people, that's 5 p.m. Some people, that's 3 p.m. When I worked at a consulting firm, that was midnight or before everybody woke up the next morning.
Right. It's important, right? That extra couple of hours can make or break the delivery there. So absolutely. Awesome. Now, I know that managing and juggling all those things that you were in the past and all the things that you do today mean that you've got some time management and productivity tricks up your sleeve too of what works for you. So a couple quick questions around that area. So what would you say if I were to delete everything off of your phone and your computer? Barring email and your schedule, what are the first apps that you would install that you count on day to day to be more productive?
Wow, great question. I would say I couldn't live without my online calendar. And associated with my calendar is an app called Calendly that I love. And I know there's several out there, but I found Calendly syncs so well for anybody who uses the Google Suite as the foundation for their email and calendar. They sync absolutely wonderfully together. And that's an app that lets you control the availability of what hours do you want to be available for different kinds of meetings. And then you send a link out to people. And instead of spending forever going back and forth on IM or email or phone or text, trying to find a time that works for both of you, that you just send a link and they compare it to their availability and bam, that's been a huge time saver for me.
Awesome. Love that one too.
Another app I like is Doodle, Doodle. And that one's really great for if you're trying to schedule a meeting with multiple people. You know those email chains where, well, I can do Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday from 1 to 3. And the next person's like, well, I don't work on Fridays. And then somebody else is like, well, Wednesdays, I do blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh my gosh, right. And it gets so muddied, you can't even follow it. So Doodle, you send this link out to people who fill out their availability. And then it just shows you, hey, these are the times when everyone's free. Or, you know what, there are no times when everyone's free. And then, okay, are there people that really don't need to be a part of this process, or can they delegate someone to go in their stead? You can problem solve it. So yes, Doodle is fantastic for organizing group meetings.
Awesome. One more? Anything else?
I'm blinking. I would say Marco Polo. And Marco Polo is it's like a video messaging app. And so instead of leaving a voicemail for someone, you're leaving a video for somebody that can be super short. It can be several minutes. And I had primarily used that as a way to keep in touch with my family because we're coast to coast in different time zones. So it's been a fun way to stay connected without worrying you're going to wake somebody up or at some weird time for them. But I've recently started using it for work where I have a communication specialist, for example, and she helps me with my social media and my newsletters and such. And so sometimes she'll send me a polo and, hey, Jen, I just wanted to remind you I need X or Y from you by such and such time. Or, hey, we're getting ready to do a blog post on New Year's resolutions. Can you leave me a polo with 2 minutes about New Year's resolutions? And because it's a lot easier to talk and get things done than to take time to open the right document and save it and send it. I've really enjoyed just talking into an app and knowing I'm done.
Absolutely. Awesome. And if you would say, people are always looking for shortcuts, right? Do you have anything that's your biggest shortcut? Some of them might be these apps that we already talked about.
Yeah. You know what?
Ask it in that way that maybe comes up that says this helps to make your day more successful and more productive.
I would say always every morning, or you can do this the night before, or you can do it the morning of, just set your intentionality out about the day. So what is your must-have list? What's your nice-to-have list? What's your I will deal with this later list? But I find if I don't get intentional about what I want to be doing and what I need to be doing, then the day just gets taken over by everything and everybody else. And Absolutely. If that's the way you're living your life, I bet you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed 100% of the time.
For sure. And then that'll help you to focus on the things that are most important.
Exactly. And I'd say along with that, so one thing I did this summer that was new for me is I worked with a coach who helped me create, he calls it a manifesto instead of a manifesto. So I have a manifesto about who I am, what my values are, and what I feel like my purpose is. So for my business, what do I see my business as? For those who aren't entrepreneurs, what do you see your role is in the organization where you are? And then from that, what do I believe to be true? And then holding everything I do up to that lens. And if it doesn't fit into this is how I want to show up and this is what I find valuable, that I either need to dismiss it, delegate it, or reframe it. I do a lot of reframing where there are tasks that suck the life out of me. And I'm getting better and better about identifying them and delegating them when I can, or outsource it or whatever. That the reframing, there are things that I do that I can't delegate that are part of my job. Let's talk about invoicing. I hate invoicing. And I've delegated as much as. Do you really?
Coming into my
That is true. But see, and that's a great reframe.
Right. You don't like the admin, but you like the result that your invoice gives.
Yes. So I am invoicing because I want to get paid and I'm going to be so excited. Or I had to do some reports this week that I really don't enjoy doing. But instead of being like, blah, I hate these reports, it's I'm getting paid to do these reports. And that is allowing me then to have the flexibility to do a lot of the work that I love.
Right. It's all about the perspective and the angle that we look at anything, right? So It makes a lot of sense. I'm a big reframer as well. So I think that it's probably one of the most powerful tools that we have to create more energy, to create more meaning in our lives, and to focus on the things that are most important.
And it's something in our control. And I think there are a lot of people probably listening to this podcast who feel like they have very little control in the job they have or in the organization they have. And there are certainly instances where that would be true. And at the same time, you can completely control your mindset. And a lot of times people aren't so sure they want to take that responsibility. Sure. But when you do, when you claim it and you reframe it, then, oh my gosh, that feeling's incredible. Because you go from feeling stunted and, crouched in a little corner to like full, and you can stand up and your shoulders back and I'm in charge of my destiny. Anyone can feel that way.
Well, it changes the result that we get, right? As you can frame something as, oh, they're against me, this is an attack or, whatever. And then that's going to totally determine the results that you get about that interaction, that relationship. And if you framed it in a different way, you'd interact with those people in a different way and you get a different result, right? So completely different.
Yes.
Love it. So what's your definition of productivity and why?
I thought a lot about that question when you posed it. And, instead of a definition, I have a vision for productivity. And that vision is loving what you're doing so much that you don't even worry about the productivity. Because I think when we're in that sweet spot of the work we're passionate about and the work we're good at in an environment that supports it, then it's like, I know what I need to do. And the prioritizing, the challenge about it is, well, do I do this thing that I'm excited about or this thing that I'm excited about? And what a great way to live. What a great mindset to have. And when I'm in that zone, then I am not worried about what distractions I need to get rid of. I'm not worried about, stressed out about time.
They just fall away, right?
They do.
When you're clear and you're in that space, then you don't get distracted. You know what it is you're working on and you're passionate about it, and you just say no to everything else.
Yep.
Absolutely. So is there anything else? I know that we kind of covered a bunch of different areas. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience before we close out today?
Yes. And actually, so we talked about communication, and I think people often underscore or do not underscore the importance of communication in the workplace. And a concern I have for 2021 is that one of two things is going to happen with interpersonal relationships in the workplace. One is we've all been just in survival mode and just worried about getting stuff done and probably not paying a whole lot of attention to the interpersonal. And we're going to go back to the workplace and it's going to be weird. And it's almost like we're going to have to relearn the social norms and how to handle when someone pops into your office and you're in the middle of doing something. What do you say? And the water cooler talk, like we're totally out of practice with that. The other thing that could happen is we have another year of working at home. Uh-huh. And I think we're past this time where we can say, well, this is temporary, this is temporary, this is temporary. If this truly is the new workforce to be working virtually and be working from home, we are going to have to come up with ways to stay connected to people. Because just because you don't see these people all the time does not at all lessen the importance of those interpersonal relationships. This is the, hey, Penny, I know you're super good with this. Can you help me? And being comfortable asking for help. This is you knowing that somebody that you work with had a death in the family, and to be able to just say, hey, I acknowledge that and I feel sorry for you. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to just figure out new ways to be connected as a people, because otherwise I think it won't take long before we see the impact then is going to be very detrimental on the productivity, the efficiency, the synergy that comes from working together. And we're going to just feel like a bunch of robots working in a, job.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a challenge that this novelty has worn off, the flexibility that's given, that things are not in place, right? That there's kind of not a communication plan, and people are even more distracted because they're using 10 different tools and they're expected to be online, and that there needs to be some more structure in place for certain things that never had structure before and maybe didn't need structure or definition, right, for how we're going to communicate about different types of topics. So I agree with you that it's going to be an important time for leaders in their organization to really step back, see what's working and what's not working, and also make that commitment to the communication and the interpersonal aspect of it. Because, if you're not exchanging and hanging out and talking to each other about each other's lives, you go from maybe having people who are engaged and own what they do to being more of a transaction. And that is not going to be good for business and good for team collaboration when it's just merely a transaction in that sense.
Yeah. And Gallup actually did a study within the last 2 years. And we're at a point now where just normally without the pandemic, we have 2/3 of our workforce is disengaged. So every engaged person you have, you've got 2 who aren't. So we've got this culture now where you're swimming upstream if you're wanting to be an engaged person. I'd love to know what those same numbers would be post-pandemic.
It would be interesting what's actually happened as a result. There were some interesting statistics that came out about meetings. So they said there was one study I saw that said that there's actually less meetings being held. And interesting enough, another one that said more meetings being held. So it depends on the context. But, so it would be really interesting to see what is happening with engagement and whether in what types of organizations and how people are really getting people engaged. And I guarantee you the people who are doing those, I've been hired for several types of motivational talks for groups that are saying, hey, I want you to come in. I want you to do something fun with the group and help us to sort of not just learn something, but also to have a fun interactive, to do some team building together. And so it's important that companies understand and invest in that and understand that even if you're not present, you can still do those types of things. You can still have book clubs. You can still do those types of things that connect people at that more interpersonal level.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all that you've shared today. I wanted you to tell us where people can reach you, give us the best URL and how they can contact you.
Yes. People can reach me at ambitionleadership.com. And right on my homepage, you can schedule a free consultation with me if you want to learn more about what I do. I also am offering a special on an emotional intelligence or social skills, people skills type assessment that comes with a debrief with me if people are interested in seeing how they measure up with their interpersonal skills.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. It was great having you here.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you, Penny.
And thank you all for your participation. I hope you've taken notes. And, that's important that each time you kind of write down some things and then identify what's the top thing that you could take away from today's show that's going to make the biggest difference in your life. Lots of different things discussed today. Guaranteed there was one thing, just one thing that you could implement this week or that you could ask yourself or think about differently that's going to make a difference for you. That's our goal here, to help you to work smarter. So my name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.